David HaMelech, of course, has been named king, but there's a second king, Ishbosheth, and it seems like Ishbosheth is in trouble because he was really king because of his great uncle, Avner. Avner was the general of his army, but now Avner was killed by David's general Yoav. And this is where we pick up chapter 4. Vayishma ben Shaul kimeit Avner b'Chevron, vayirpu yadav b'chol Yisrael nivhalu. When the son of Saul, and interestingly, a number of times over the last chapter, he hasn't been referred to by name, Ishbosheth. It's like he's a nothing. We don't even mention his name. Here he's called Ben Shaul. And of course, that we also remember the many times in Shmuel Aleph where Shaul was upset at David and didn't want to say his name and called him Ben Yishai. But so here, the son of Saul, Ishbosheth, he hears that Avner had died and his heart melts. And all of Israel was alarmed. They know that this is not going to be good. The power was with the general, with Avner, and now Avner has been killed. Ushnei anashim sarei gdudim hayu ven Shaul shem achad ba'ana v'shem hasheni rochav b'nei rimon habe'eroti mibnei binyamin ki gam be'erot techashev al binyamin. And again, Saul's son, no name Ishbosheth, had two men who worked for him, two commanders. One was named Ba'ana and one was named Rechav, and they were the sons of Rimon. And it just tells us Rimon was part of the territory of Binyamin. Vayivruchu haberotim gitaima v'hayusham garim ad hayom hazeh. And the Beerotites in the past, they had fled to Gitayim, where they lived until this very day. And there are those who say that happened. Rashi says it happened when Shaul died, that they abandoned these cities they were closer to the Plishti territory, and so they ran away from there. There are others who say that they're going to run away based upon the events that are going to happen in this chapter, the Malbim and others, and actually that's what makes probably a little bit more sense. So continuing in verse 4. Uli Honatan ben Shaul ben Nechei Raglaim ben Chamesh Shanim Hayab Bevot Shmuat Shaul v'Honatan meYisrael Vatiseu Omanto Vatanos Vayihi Bechovza Lanus Vayipol Vayivseich Ushmo Mephibosh. And here we have another very sad story, and this is because we're discussing the family of Shaul. We mentioned that Yonatan had a son. So David's best friend Yonatan, who he was partners with, who he swore an allegiance to, who they said they'll take care of each other's descendants. He had a son who was crippled. And the reason was when he was 5 years old, when the war happened, where Shaul and Yonatan were killed, and now we know it's already a little bit later, it might be a few years after that. It's not clear to us exactly, but at least for 2 years Ishbosheth reigned, so it has to be at least about 2 years later. And when the war happens, back in what was chapter 31 of Shmuel Aleph, when Shaul and Yonatan died, he was, his nurse or somebody was taking him, and she picked him up and they started to run away because she was worried that they would come and they would attack the Philistines who won. They would come to the palace, they would attack, and kill the descendants. And so she took the child and they're running away, and she dropped him or something, and he became crippled. He became lame. Okay. And then for some reason that pasuk we're told in the middle, but now we switch from there and we go back to discussing these two men, Rachev uva'ana, right? These two people who were living in the territory of Binyamin. Maybe they were from the tribe of Binyamin. They're commanders in Ishbosheth's army, and they reached the palace in the heat of the day, the middle of the day. And because it's the middle of the day, right? This is Mediterranean culture. They take, I know it's not the correct word because this is Spanish, but they take a siesta in the middle of the day. It gets too hot. They lie down. They go to sleep, right? And then if they're like the Spanish, they dinner at 11 p.m. at night or whatever. And so everybody's lying down. Everybody's relaxing. V'hinei ba'u, we're in verse 6, ad toch habayit locheach chitim, so they went inside the house as though they were fetching wheat, and they struck him in the belly, and Rachab and his brother Ba'ana, they went through. b'chadar mishkavo, vayakuhu v'amitu v'yasu et rosho v'yachu et rosho v'yalchu derech harava kol halayla. So after they killed this first person, they go into his room, and again, this is a strange thing. This is the killing of Ishbosheth. His name is not mentioned. This is the son of Shaul. It's like he doesn't count. He doesn't matter. His name is not even mentioned in this entire chapter, or at least in this part where he is killed. So they go into his room, his chamber, right, the innermost chamber where he's asleep, and they stab him to death. They behead him, and they take his head all the way all through the night to the Arava. Vayaviu et Rosh Ishbosheth el David Chevron. And this is another case, right? They're trying to show that their allegiance is with David. So they go to Hebron, where David is king for the last couple of years, and where he will remain king for 7 years. They bring the head of Ishbosheth. Vayomru el Elimelech. They say to the king, Hinei Rosh Ishbosheth ben Shaul. Finally, his name is mentioned. Oivecha. Here's the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, your enemy. Asher bikeshet nafshecha, who wanted to kill you. Now, it's not clear. You could say it's a sort of a ambiguous description there. Is that misplaced modifier? Is that what it's called in English? Who was the one who wanted to kill David? Was it Shaul or was it Ishbosheth? We know certainly it was Shaul, but Shaul is dead. So if Ishbosheth is dying because Shaul wanted to kill David, that's completely unjustified. And if it's Ishbosheth who wanted to kill David, we never saw that Ishbosheth wanted to kill David. And so now what has God done? God is avenging for my Lord, the king, that is for you, David, upon Shaul and his offspring, right? They're saying we are the messengers of God. It's amazing. There are many, many people in the world. If it comes to doing kindness, acting like God, following God, as the Gemara says, ma'urachum machatarachum, to be merciful, to be kind, and that's following God. A lot of people don't want to do it, but if they want to be the executioner in the name of God, they're more than happy to be that. To be the one to point out the deficiencies, the problems that people have, or worse, to perform violence upon another. So these two men, Rachev and Bana, they say, God, this is God's revenge. Oh, by the way, we're the ones who killed him and beheaded him. And right, we know this already, earlier at least, with the death of Shaul and Yehonatan. And obviously David had a closer relationship with Yehonatan, and Shaul was still his father-in-law. And even though Shaul wanted to kill him, David was not very happy about the killing of his perceived enemies. And thus it should come as no surprise. Vayan David et Rachev et Bana achiv b'nei Rimon habe'eroti vayomer lehem Chai Adonai asher padat nafshi mikol tzara. So first he says, I swear by God who has rescued me from every sorrow. Those sounds a lot words like we have in different Mizmorei Tehillim in the book of Psalms. Ki hamagid li le'mor inei meit Shaul v'hu haya k'vaser be'einav v'ochsa bo ve'argenu b'tziklad asher lititi lo b'sora. So I swear by God, God has saved me from every trouble. And by the way, some time ago there was a man who came to Siklag, and he told me that Saul was dead, and he thought he was bringing me good news, but I didn't reward him. What did I do? I seized him and I killed him. How much more when wicked men have killed a blameless man in bed in his own house? Right? David understands this verse earlier when he said the person who was looking to kill you was referring to Shaul and not Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth's an innocent man. David knows that. He's nobody. He was in his bed in his own house. How could you do such a thing? I will certainly avenge his blood on you, and I will rid the earth of you. And those words, sound a lot like the language in the book of Dvarim, where we talk about idolaters and people who lead Bnei Yisrael astray. We have a lot of instances. You have to excise the evil from your midst. And David is saying, you guys are evil. You think you were doing something good? You were not. It's interesting to think of this verse just in modern context, sort of vigilante justice, people who right, think that they're doing good, people who go and I'm going to take the law into my own hands. And at least in this book, David is saying, no. You're not allowed to take the law into your own hands. I want to get rid of Ishbosheth. I want to get rid of him. I want to become king. Well, I can wait. I have time. I know I'll become king. I don't need you to go and decide that I'm going to become king by you guys coming and killing this person. Vayitzav David et Ne'arim. Now get ready for something gruesome. We're in verse 12, the last verse in this short chapter. David commands the young men, Vayahargum, and they kill them. Vayikatzitzu et yedehem v'et raglehem. And they go and they cut off their hands and their feet. Vayitlu al habrecha b'Chevron. And they hang them by the pool in Chevron. I think the Midrash makes the comment like the hands that killed them, their hands were cut off. And the feet that they with which they walked into the palace to go and kill the king, they cut off their feet because the feet were the ones that, right, Nancy Sinatra, these boots were made for walking. And therefore they cut off the hands and the feet. Yes, that song is way before my time. And they hang them by the pool in Chevron where it's public and everybody could seize it. Yet Rosh Ishboshet lachu vayikberu bekever Avner bechevron. And they took the head of Ishboshet and they buried it in the grave of Avner in Chevron. Symbolically, right? Chevron, Chaver, Chibur, a city of connection, a city of friendship. In Ir Miklat, a city of refuge. The place where David says the innocent Avner, who should not have been killed, who David even laments for. And now Ishboshet is also somebody who David says was killed unjustifiably. I don't know where the rest of his body is. Presumably David does not know where the rest of his body is, but he deserves also respect and he deserves to be buried properly. And again, as we've said in the last number of chapters, it's interesting. On the one hand, we see David really wants to show respect to Shaul and to his family with the laments, with the dirges for Shaul, for Yehonatan, for Avner here as well. So there's a way of looking and then saying emotionally he is affected by this and he cares and he worries and he thinks it's the wrong thing and that's why he's doing it. But on the other hand, you have to think a little bit, again, Machiavellian, he's going to become king. You have to show respect to a king. This is what happens if you kill a king. This is right. So there's a little bit of that, which is impossible. And it's connected with the whole idea, which we've stated that David, and he doesn't succeed in this way, wants to become king, but he wants to become king through peaceful means. He has no interest in war. He has no interest in bloodshed. He didn't start up with Avner at the pool. That was Yoav. He didn't want Shaul and Yonatan to be killed in a terrible battle. He didn't want Avner to be killed. He wanted Shalom in the last chapter. And Yoav kills, he does it, he wages war at a time of peace. And here too, he could have figured out a way to work things out with Ishboshet. Ishboshet in a couple of chapters or last chapter already allowed David to take Ishboshet's sister, Michal, his wife, back to him. And so David here is demonstrating on many levels that the way to the kingdom in Israel is not through violence. That's not how it should happen. It shouldn't be a coup d'etat. It shouldn't be through killing. It shouldn't be through bloodshed. God wants me to be king. I'll become king, and it should happen peacefully. And so here, once again, unfortunately, David's plan and his hope doesn't come true. But at this point, it appears that most of the people who were in the way for David to become king of all of Israel are now out of the way. Shaul, the descendants of Shaul, right? We have one mentioned, Mephibosheth, but he is lame. And while today that wouldn't necessarily make him somebody who would not be allowed to be king, I would imagine at that time it would have, especially when the king was supposed to lead them in battle. And so here too, David that's why we have him mentioned, but everybody else who is sort of possibly ahead of David in the line of succession is no longer there. And David can, we would assume, have a straight path now to the kingship of Israel.